on CityCast Nashville. We're heading to the water, not to cool off, but to hear from two local business owners, Margaret Littman and Annie Claver, who both recently sold their paddling companies. They share what it was like operating in metro parks and what ultimately led them to walk away. A quick note, their stories include discussions of safety concerns that may be difficult for some listeners, so please take care while listening. It's Tuesday, July 8th. I'm your host, Marie Cecile Anderson, and this is what Nashville's talking about. Annie, Margaret, always a pleasure having you here. Welcome back to CityCast Nashville.
Hi, good morning.
Good morning. Thanks for having us.
You're both friends of the pod, but do you mind just telling us who you are, the name of your business, and what year you started?
My name is Margaret Littman. I started Nashville Paddle Company in 2012, a paddleboard company, rentals and classes.
My name's Annie Claver. I founded River Queen Voyages in 2015. It was originally a kayak rental company and expanded to river scavenger hunts, pedal pontoon boat, and a 4-person pedal kayak operating downtown Nashville.
So both of your businesses operate out of metro parks. Margaret, you at Hamilton Creek Recreation Area on Percy Priest Lake, and Annie, you along the Cumberland River. What made you want to partner with parks to start your companies?
I wrote an article about a company that was making paddle boards in Florida and trying to bring the sport of paddleboarding outside of coastal areas into lakes and rivers. And they taught me to paddle, and I just loved it. And I wanted my friends to paddle with me. I bought 5 boards to rent them out. And then it just kind of turned into a thing. We really the whole idea was to make paddleboarding accessible to people who didn't want to buy a board at the time. And partnering with Metro Parks seemed like the best way to do that.
I had been in the corporate world for about 20 years and felt pretty burnt out from it and needed a break. Was living at the time in Madison off Neely's Bend. I bought a short sail on the river post-flood, so it was very cheap, and bought a kayak from Costco and started kayaking out of my backyard, and had a whole group of friends, and we would go out on the weekends to the lakes and the rivers, and I just didn't understand why the Nashville riverfront wasn't more activated for paddling. And so in 2015, I got the first kayaking permit to use the Shelby Park boat ramp and the Cumberland Park, now Wausioto Park, boat landings to run shuttles and do rentals.
Ah, okay. Was that a lot of hoops to jump through?
Yes.
Sounds like an easy thing to start, but then once you get into it, it's a lot of red tape. We're going to get into that more. But first, I want to just ask Margaret, would you tell us about the boathouse you restored at the Hamilton Creek Recreation Area? What was there when you first started?
Sure. So for a couple of years, there was this building at Hamilton Creek that had previously been a concession stand and a lifeguard stand. It was all boarded up, and we kept asking, hey, what about that? Because one of the less fun parts of this kind of business is moving your gear around. We really wanted to have a permanent location. And we were just told that building had been boarded up for 30 years, and they weren't interested. And then one day, someone from Parks came up and said, you should go ask your question again about that building. That building does have restrooms that were not used. That property is owned by the Army Corps of Engineers, but Metro Parks leases it from Army Corps. Army Corps wanted those bathrooms to be open and available to the public, and Metro Parks didn't have the staff to do that. And so we submitted a proposal that included us monitoring those bathrooms, cleaning them, opening them. When we did get it unboarded and walked inside, there was a Nashville banner newspaper on the floor from 1986.
Wow.
So it really had been sitting there for quite some time. And so we did gut it and paint it and turn it into a paddleboard stand.
Wow. And public restrooms.
And
Yay.
public restrooms, yes.
Yay.
I have a lot to say about public restrooms. So
Same.
Yeah.
Oh, really? Shall we save that or for another
Yeah,
episode?
we could just, I mean, it's part of this whole conversation. It's one of the things that the city of Nashville doesn't do well. Think about it downtown. One of your reliable ones is the Nashville Public Library, which is temporarily closed. But in parks, many of them, if they're open at all, are seasonal. At Hamilton Creek, where we were, the building is right next to a playground. There's the lake there. There's a BMX track there. It's reasonable to think that people could expect to have a public restroom in those circumstances. And even when we were operating it, we were only allowed to have it open when we were open.
I mean, I've been in Shelby Park and the bathrooms have been closed. There's so many people there.
Shelby Park and downtown are the same situation. We were only allowed to have the bathrooms open when we were operational. The specific area I'm talking about where the bathrooms are, they're in the base of the bridge building, which is right at the pedestrian bridge where the Titan Stadium is. And, there's quite a bit of activity going on around there. And when the bathrooms were locked or for whatever reason we were not allowed to use them, the response was, well, just use the porta potties, but think about some differently abled folks who may not be able to use porta potties. So I agree with the sentiment that in a world-class city, we can and should do much better than this.
Well, okay, it sounds like the bathroom stuff is just one of many things that led to the reason why you all both decided to sell your businesses earlier this year, almost at the same time.
We operate right where the new Nissan Stadium is being built. Really, the only reason River Queen lasted 10 years was through sheer willpower of making people open the streets for us, advocating for access, joining organizations that care about access to the water to say, hey, you can't just keep closing off to the public. So once the stadium construction started, I had already decided I was going to sell the pontoon part of the business because there's not a lot of marinas in downtown Nashville. So expansion wasn't really possible there. There's some conflict of interest things going on. And so I decided to sell that off. And then the buyer wanted the kayak business and the brand as well. And it was someone who's going to rehire my people. So it was just right place, right time. And the deal closed in January.
Our situation was a little bit different. Part of it was that Liz, my business partner, and I, we both kind of were ready to move on. We didn't have the energy to keep dealing with some of these issues. And one of our former customers wanted to buy the business. She is amazing. She's super energetic. Both Liz and I loved the idea of having a woman take over our business. The time was right.
One of the challenges we both had with selling the business, I held 2 permits, one for kayaking and one for what's called a CVP, a commercial vessel permit. You can't sell the permits. Whatever buyer has to then go through a reapplication process. So I had a few folks pass on buying River Queen because they're like, well, how do I get the permits? I said, well, you have to buy the business. And then you have to apply for the permits.
And we should add that the permits are annual permits.
Ooh, so every year. Do you have to pay for your permits? And if you're in a partnership with Metro Parks, do they receive a cut of your revenue?
The kayaking permit was a flat fee. So a flat fee every month that you were in season. The commercial vessel permit was a different setup. It was 15% of ticket sales. 15% of any merch that you sold on Parks property, that ended up being a whole lot of money.
Wow.
I wish this were not a podcast so people could see Marie's face at the 15%.
That's crazy.
Oh, sorry. There's also a $500 a month rent at the downtown docks, which you have to pay annually, even if you're only operating seasonally. Plus the rent at the marina because there's no overnight mooring downtown.
Our permit was different. And I think that that's one of the things when I talk about opportunities, I do think there's an opportunity to have some transparency about permits with metro parks. So our permit was a monthly fee plus a percentage, about 15% of our gross, not our net. And then we could earn back a reduction of some of that percentage for doing things like operating the bathrooms, operating free classes for community classes through metro parks, that kind of thing. We were happy to do all of those things. And that is part of, what I think a public partnership would look like.
Did either of you ever worry that your annual permit wouldn't get renewed by parks?
If you are a business that's not changing ownership and that you are abiding by the rules of the permit, there is an understanding that your permit would be renewed. And we never had any reason to believe otherwise. But on paper, every attorney told us, do not sign this permit because there's no guarantee. And these small businesses have very small margins and all this risk. You invest all this money in building this brand and this partnership with Metro Parks, and then you hope that it will continue. But that is a real leap of faith. And a lot of people understandably don't want to do that.
Yeah, absolutely no guarantees.
And then on top of that, what we would run into downtown is our kayaking permit was under the special events umbrella. That means that any special event would trump our access. So on top of everything that Margaret's saying, there were more weekends than I would care to remember where we showed up and we just couldn't get our vans through because there was an event that no one told us about. So that's a really bad experience for visitors coming to Nashville, where they have signed up for something, paid money, showed up, and we had to turn them away because we weren't able to access the water.
I want to say, Annie, when we interviewed you a year ago on how to kayak downtown Nashville, it was one of our most popular episodes because I really think locals don't know that you can kayak downtown.
I'll tell you what, even last year, people would come up to me and say, I didn't know you could do this. I have lived here for 15 years. But the things that would keep me going would be something like a local who was, it's a Friday afternoon, had a really tough work week. They could call us and be on the water in an hour.
It's different on Percy Priest versus downtown, but it's the same sort of thing. When people would drive 20 minutes to Hamilton Creek and get to go on a sunset paddle and see no buildings and no houses and have this completely serene experience, or do paddleboard yoga on the lake.
You did the full moon paddles, which were very popular as well.
To get to have those sorts of experiences in the city and then be home and have dinner. That's exactly why we did this. We wanted people to see this more layered experience of Nashville. And we could go on forever and talk about all the health benefits of doing that. This is something that I think parks departments should offer, and they do offer in other cities. Parks can't currently do that. They don't have the funding to do it, and somebody else can come on the podcast and talk about why metro parks are underfunded. But if they can't do it, then having public partnerships are great ways to do that. Also, we are doing a lot of things that park staff tries to do but can't do because they're just underfunded, right? So we're picking up trash. We're helping fill in when there's some sort of park ranger or park police need and there's not someone immediately there. Annie and her staff have done a number of river rescues, and those are things that obviously we're there. We're happy to help do.
Right.
But those are roles that I think should be appreciated for the partnership piece of it.
Well, let's get into the safety aspect of your job, of what you've had to do in the past. We knew we wanted to do this episode after you both announced your sales, but we weren't quite sure when we were going to run it. And then, so sadly, tragedy struck last month 5-year-old Tobias Hancock drowned while swimming with his family at the Hamilton Creek Recreation Area on Percy, where you used to be based, Margaret. Can you tell us about how you felt when you heard the news?
I mean, I wanted to throw up.
Mm.
I don't know the specifics of what happened in that incident other than what I've read in the news and you've read in the news. It's heartbreaking. One of the things that I would like to see is free life jackets available year-round at Hamilton Creek and at other launches. Army Corps has that at several of their locations. Tennessee State Parks has that at several locations. We used to have them at Hamilton Creek when we were there, and I tried to leave those when we sold and the building was closed at Metro Parks, and there wasn't anyone at Metro Parks who would take that over, would be responsible for that. Army Corps ended up taking those life jackets and moving them to Anderson Road. Again, I'm not blaming anyone at Metro Parks for what happened in this incident, but if Parks and the privately owned vendors could work together more as partners rather than adversaries or landlord-tenant sort of dynamics, I think there would be better results for everyone.
So there are no swimming signs posted on that beach now, but when did those first appear?
In between last summer and this summer.
And then who uses that beach? And why are people still swimming there despite the new rules?
To be clear, I'm not sure what the new rules are. I don't know whether swimming is really not allowed or whether that is something related to liability. 40 years ago, there did used to be lifeguards. That park is so crowded on the weekends, in particular in the summer. And it is, in my opinion, like the best melting pot of Nashville. You hear multiple languages being spoken there. It's kids, it's adults, it's engagement photos being taken. There are people with their dogs. There are church services. Everyone uses that park. It's also a free place to get in the water and cool off when it's 100 and whatever degrees outside.
Right.
Which is exactly what a public park should be.
Well, Annie, I'm going to turn it to you now. When we talked to you last summer, you mentioned your work in trying to help recover the body of Riley Strain, the young man who drowned in the Cumberland after a night drinking on Broadway. I don't know a better way to ask this, so please, listeners, know that this is a trigger warning. Was that the first time you were called in to help search for a body?
No, that was not the first time. I knew that if he went in where he did, he would have been headed downbound, which is where they eventually found him. But I'm grateful that I got a ton of calls and texts that next day. And we did take the boat out and perform a search for him. But no, it wasn't the first time. The pedestrian bridge is right there. So we've done some rescues in that regard. There was another incident, I think 2 summers ago, where a man who was strung out on something, I'm not sure what it was stuck in a drain pipe on the river. So there's a radio. Everyone who has a commercial boat has a radio on the boat. And the CSX train bridge was radioing the barges and other boats in the area because they were hearing this man call out for help. The train guy called 911. No one came for, I don't know, at least an hour. So we had a boat full of tourists.
Oh.
And at that point, you're just like, well, our boat is small enough. It's a pontoon boat. We can get to shore and trim up the motor. And we've got safety equipment on board because it's a U.S. Coast Guard certified vessel. And we did. We went and got ropes and got this guy out of the drain.
Wow.
And then had to carry on with all right, now let's put the party music back on and let's go see everything from Nashville downtown.
Oh, my goodness, Annie.
Fortunately, the passengers on that cruise were all really sweet. But If you can get a 5-star review out of a rescue
yeah.
a naked man out of a drain pipe in the middle of your cruise.
Sure, they didn't forget that experience. That's for sure.
The legacy, I hope, of River Queen is we were always absolute psychos for safety. We set the standard for how people should operate on the river. The view of the river is that it's dirty and dangerous, right? That's the view. I hope that over the past 10 years, we've been able to change people's minds about what it is, what it can be.
Yeah, since tourism does drive everything here in Nashville, it seems. Do you think Nashville could be known as a great outdoor city?
Absolutely. I mean, that was the founding philosophy of River Queen, was that nature heals, and connecting with nature in an urban setting is something everyone needs. I love the example Margaret gave of the melting pot over at Hamilton Creek. Everyone loves water.
The whole reason that Nashville as a city is founded where it is because there was this river here. It is the lifeblood of our city. So in my other job as a journalist, I get to travel a lot. And I paddle a lot when I travel. I've paddled in every state because that seemed like a fun goal. And so one of the things that has enabled me to do is see how other cities handle water access and paddle access. In Hattiesburg, Mississippi, they have these signs at all the launches with a map that says, this is where you are. When you put in here, your next takeout is 1.5 river miles, and it will look like this, and it'll show you a photo of what the next takeout is. When we have conversations about this, and I'll bring up that example, someone will say, yeah, that's great, but Hattiesburg is a much smaller city than Nashville. And I'll say, okay, in Chicago, they have something called the Wild Mile, and it's a launch, and they've replanted it with all these natural plants, and it's attracted all this wildlife, and it's this great thing on the Chicago River. And then people will say, well, Chicago is a much bigger city. So I don't know what the Goldilocks answer there is.
So we have a real pivotal opportunity right now with the East Bank development.
Yes.
It's 338 acres of to be developed downtown land, and most of it's on the river. So there's a huge opportunity there to say, hey, developers, great that you want to put a hotel here. As part of this development, you have to have river access, or you have to build your part of a river walk. So I think if we are going to really be a world-class city, I would encourage folks on the East Bank Authority, in the mayor's office, people who do economic development, to think of this holistically. How cool would it be if you're downtown on Broadway and you can just hop in a little water taxi and go to the Titan Stadium? That is the fastest way to get from point A to point B. Let's do that.
All right. So final question. After hearing all these challenges of owning these businesses, what would you say to anyone who wants to start a small business in a metro park right now? I wish y'all could see their faces.
I would say talk to other outfitters, ask some questions. My permit didn't change much over 10 years. So you're going to get into some pretty hardened institutional systems. And if that's not something that you can stomach, then maybe it's not for you.
For anyone who is interested in doing this, I want to underscore the things that Annie and I were talking about. Also is there is extreme pleasure in helping people who haven't felt confident paddleboarding or haven't had the opportunity to get outside to see that part of Nashville. There are a lot of difficulties, but there are also an extraordinary pleasure in doing that, an extraordinary reward. One of the reasons I think that Annie and I became friends, in addition to being people who had similar kinds of businesses, is that we do see this as a way to help make Nashville better.
One of my favorite experiences captaining the boat is people love to shit on bachelorettes, right? But to me, it was, hey, you have organized this for probably months to try to celebrate someone you love. And by the time they got to me, found this weird spot underneath the pedestrian bridge, got on the boat, about 20 minutes into the cruise, you can just sort of see people like visibly relax. Water does that to people, right? It's just this phenomenon where it's part of our humanity. So if I can give them 90 minutes of joy, that was always worth it to me.
Oh, that's beautiful. Well, thank you both again for sharing your stories. And
I mean, thank you so much for listening to our rants and letting us talk about this.
well, so my favorite job I've ever had in all of my jobs, I've had so many, but back in college, I worked for Outdoor Adventures in Todd, North Carolina, and it was kayaking and canoes. And it was exactly because of the joy that I was able to give these people. And I was so young, and if I had just known that that was going to be the best job, I probably should have just stayed out there.
Early.
I peaked way too early. That's all for today here on CityCast Nashville. If you enjoyed the show, why not tell your friends, rate the show, leave us a review, and subscribe to our Hey Nashville newsletter. We'll be back tomorrow morning with more news from around the city. Toodles!